The afternoon light filtered through the capiz windows, casting honeyed patches that crawled slowly across the wooden floorboards. I sat at the heavy kitchen table, watching my grandmother work. She held a wooden spoon, moving it in a slow, deliberate circle through the pot of tablea chocolate. The spoon clicked against the ceramic sides, a steady, rhythmic sound that filled the quiet space, marking the passage of time. She did not look up. Her eyes remained fixed on the thickening liquid as it swirled, dark and glossy. She added a splash of milk, then a pinch of sugar, her movements precise and practiced. The scent of rich, earthy cocoa began to rise, curling into the air to meet us. "Chocolate likes patience," she murmured. She continued the motion, never speeding up, never pausing, as the liquid transformed into a velvet consistency. The scent of rich, earthy cocoa deepened, blooming into the air until it felt thick enough to touch. It was a heavy, comforting fragrance that clung to the wooden beams and the cool surface of the table. Beside the stove, the counter held the evidence of the morning's labor. Rows of Suman rested there, each one wrapped tightly in oil-brushed leaves. They had finished their time in the steamer, and now waited in the quiet heat of the kitchen. A faint, lingering steam rose from the bundles, carrying the faint, sweet smell of coconut milk and rice. I reached out to touch the edge of a leaf, feeling the slick, cool texture against my fingertips. They were perfectly shaped, uniform in their presentation, a testament to the care taken in their making. The kitchen felt like a vessel, holding this warmth against the vast, shifting afternoon. Every corner of the room seemed to vibrate with the quiet energy of the preparation. The steam dissipated slowly, swirling into the shafts of sunlight. It was a scene of absolute stillness, where the only movement was the rising vapor. The screen door creaked, breaking the silence as my cousin stepped inside. Her palms were damp, and the faint, sharp scent of wet soil followed her into the room. She walked straight to the basin, the water splashing against the ceramic as she rinsed the garden grit from her fingers. "The basil and chili plants are thriving," she said, her voice bright and clear against the low hum of the stove. She grabbed a towel, drying her hands with quick, efficient motions. Moments later, the floorboards groaned under a heavier tread. My uncle entered, his arms cradling a basket of laundry that smelled of sun and wind. He moved to the corner, his hands working with practiced precision, as he folded shirts, stacking them into neat, squared piles. The kitchen, once a quiet space of solitary focus, began to fill with the gentle energy of their presence. The house hummed now, a low, steady vibration of activity that made the walls feel alive. Near the window, where the light fell in soft, honeyed bars, my mother took her place. She held a shirt, the fabric taut, and began to work. Her needle moved with a steady, hypnotic grace, pulling the thread through the weave in small, even stitches. Each pull was a deliberate act of repair. Beyond the glass, the world was not silent. A rooster called out from the distant fields, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the afternoon haze. A dog barked once, a low, guttural warning that quickly faded into the shade of the trees. These sounds did not disrupt the room. They punctuated it, marking the passage of time. My uncle continued his work in the corner, his hands smoothing the laundry into perfect, crisp folds. My cousin organized the garden tools, her movements light and sure. I remained at the table, watching the way the light caught the dust motes dancing in the air. We were all occupied, yet there was no rush. Each task was a thread in a larger, invisible tapestry of our shared life. The house held us in a state of suspended motion, where the clinking of a needle, the folding of cloth, and the distant calls of the field blended into a single, resonant hum. We were a collection of individual rhythms, all beating in time, creating a sanctuary of purpose. At the stove, my grandmother leaned closer to the pot. The liquid had darkened, shifting from a thin, swirling stream to a heavy velvet mass that clung to the back of the wooden spoon. She lifted the spoon, watching the chocolate drip back down in a slow, thick ribbon. The earthy, bitter scent of the cocoa intensified, filling the space between the kitchen table and the window. She added a final splash of milk, the white swirl disappearing into the deep brown as she stirred with renewed, deliberate focus. The clicking of the wood against the ceramic bowl became the only sound, She stood still for a moment, her gaze fixed on the pot, checking the consistency against the light. Satisfied, she pulled the pot from the heat. The sudden absence of the burner's hum left a heavy, expectant silence. She reached for the thick, rough-textured cups, lining them up on the table. She did not look at us, but her posture commanded attention. She wiped her hands on her apron, turned toward the family, and spoke. "Call everyone," she said. The command hung in the air, crisp and absolute. The quiet rhythm of our individual chores shattered. Chairs scraped against the wooden floor as we moved. We converged on the kitchen table, the wood groaning slightly under the weight of the spread. My cousin placed a plate of sliced mangoes at the center, the yellow fruit glistening under the afternoon light. A bowl of caramelized latke followed, its deep, toasted scent mingling with the steam rising from the cups. Grandmother took the lead, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She reached for the Suman, the oil-brushed banana leaves yielding to her touch. As she peeled them back, the glossy, tender rice emerged, steaming and fragrant. She served each of us, her movements precise and unhurried. She sprinkled sugar over the portions and added a generous spoonful of the dark, sticky latke. I took my cup of chocolate, the ceramic warm against my palms. The surface was smooth, a dark, velvet mirror. I took the first bite of the Suman. The rice was soft, yielding instantly to the crunch of the caramelized topping. I followed it with a sip of the chocolate. It was thick, coating the tongue with a deep, bittersweet intensity that radiated warmth through my chest. The plates were empty, yet no one reached for the door. We remained, the ceramic cups still radiating heat against our palms. The urgency of the meal had dissolved, replaced by a slow, drifting ease. My uncle broke the silence, his voice low as he spoke of a neighbor's stray puppy. My cousin leaned in, describing the rhythm of the previous night's rain against the roof, her hands tracing patterns on the table. My mother added a detail from the book she had been reading, her words weaving into the space between us like the afternoon breeze. There was no rush to clear the table or return to the chores waiting in the shadows. We simply existed in that shared space, the conversation moving without direction, anchored only by the presence of one another. I watched the light shift across the floorboards. The house felt steady, a vessel holding us in a moment that demanded nothing more than our attention. The clatter of the kitchen had faded, leaving the quiet murmur of family voices to fill the room. In that stillness, the connection was not in what we said, but in the fact that we were all there. The lingering quiet finally broke as the light began to slant lower. My cousin gathered the used banana leaves, carrying them toward the compost pile with steady steps. My uncle moved through the house, collecting the laundry to return to the bedrooms. I remained in the kitchen, pulling a stool toward the basin to help my grandmother. The soapy water swirled, forming iridescent bubbles that caught the fading afternoon light. She handed me a single sturdy leaf, her movements deliberate. She showed me how to align the edges, her fingers guiding mine with gentle pressure. "Gently," she said, her voice barely rising above the sound of the water. I folded the leaf, but the crease was uneven, the edges fraying under my grip. I tried again, watching her hands for the rhythm of the motion. On the third attempt, the leaf held its shape, a crisp, clean square. She nodded once, a small, satisfied movement, and returned to the dishes. The kitchen hummed with the soft clatter of porcelain and the rhythmic splash of water. There was no grand ceremony in this moment, only the simple, repetitive labor. We worked in tandem, the bubbles popping against our wrists, the air cooling as the sun dipped toward the horizon. The lesson was silent, passed through the texture of the leaves. I stepped out onto the porch as the evening air turned crisp. The garden leaves rustled in the wind, a soft, dry sound that seemed to echo the quiet inside the house. I sat on the wooden steps, watching the sky transform into a deep, gold-tinged canvas. There was no urgency, no grand event to mark the end of the day, only the lingering scent of coconut, the phantom warmth of a cup in my palms, and the steady, rhythmic pulse of a home that understood its own peace. Years have passed since that afternoon, yet that stillness remains a sanctuary I return to whenever the world outside moves too fast. I close my eyes, and the distance between then and now collapses. I am back in that kitchen, watching the slow, deliberate stirring of chocolate, I feel the texture of the leaf under my fingers and hear the low, steady murmur of my family. It was not a moment of perfection, but a moment of existence, where we simply were, together and unhurried. That gold-tinged light still glows in the back of my mind, a constant, quiet reminder of what it means to be truly present. Even now, in the rush of modern days, I chase that specific silence. I reach for the memory of that kitchen, for the patient hands of my grandmother, and for the way the light held us in that fragile, beautiful suspension of time. It is a place I carry with me, a quiet anchor that keeps me steady, no matter how far I travel from that porch, or how much the world demands of my time. The sky fades, the shadows lengthen, but the warmth of that afternoon never fully cools.